The world doubted, the whispers came first, then the headlines. Rwanda isn't ready. A landlocked nation in the heart of Africa, once scarred by tragedy, was now being asked to host one of the biggest cycling competitions on the planet, the UCI Road World Championships. Critics shook their heads. Where are the hotels? The stadiums? The roads? The safety guarantees? It wasn't just skepticism. It was disbelief. Many said Africa itself wasn't prepared, that the continent was too fragile, too unstable, too underdeveloped to handle a sporting spectacle of this scale. The irony? These were the same arguments used for decades to exclude Africa from the global sporting map. But Rwanda had other plans. The skepticism was sharp, global, and at times dismissive. Commentators in Europe and North America questioned whether Rwanda could ever deliver what nations like France, Australia, or the United States had spent decades perfecting. Cycling insiders said the infrastructure isn't there. They pointed to Kigali's compact cityscape, its hilly terrain, and asked, could it even support the logistical chaos of thousands of athletes, coaches, fans, and media? Security experts warned, this is Africa. The risks are too high. They conjured images of instability, forgetting that Rwanda had quietly become one of the safest nations on the continent. Economists frowned. It's too expensive. Hosting the UCI Road World Championships requires not only money, but vision investment in airports, transport, communications, and tourism infrastructure. To many, Rwanda looked too small, too resource-limited, to even dare. Yet, beneath the criticism was a deeper, unspoken doubt. Could a nation once associated almost exclusively with its darkest days of 1994 stand tall under the brightest sporting lights? The skepticism wasn't just about roads or hotels. It was about identity, about whether Rwanda belonged in the club of nations capable of shaping global sport. And the world was watching. The criticisms weren't aimed only at Rwanda. They echoed a century of dismissals of Africa itself. No African country had ever hosted the UCI Road World Championships, not one. Europe owned cycling's history. South America and Asia had slowly entered the fold. But Africa, still seen as a spectator, never a stage. Some argued, cycling is a European sport. Africa doesn't have the tradition. They forgot about the Tour de Rwanda, a race that had, year after year, grown into one of the most respected competitions on the UCI calendar. Known for its passionate fans lining mountain roads, for climbs as brutal as the Alps or Pyrenees, and for an energy that no European race could match. Others said, Africa isn't ready for global events. Yet history proved them wrong. South Africa had hosted the World Cup in 2010. Morocco had hosted major athletics championships. Nigeria had carried the Olympic torch for football in 1996, shocking the world by winning gold. But Rwanda's bid carried something different. This wasn't just about sport, it was about symbolism. If the UCI Championships could come to Kigali, it would shatter the myth that global competitions belong only to the West. And still, critics asked, would the roads hold? Would the hotels be built? Would the organizers deliver? The Africa question wasn't just about logistics, it was about dignity. Could Rwanda prove once and for all that Africa was not a footnote in global sport, but an equal player? The answer would come not in words, but in action. When the skeptics spoke of Rwanda's lack of infrastructure, they had never set foot on the rolling hills of Kigali. The image in their minds was a city of dirt paths, chaotic intersections, and disorganized transit. But reality told a very different story. Kigali's roads are among the smoothest and cleanest on the continent. The government invested heavily in widening key arteries, paving highways that link the capital to secondary towns, and carving cycling routes that mirror the ambition of European hosts. Driving through the city feels almost surreal. Palm-lined boulevards, bright LED streetlights, and spotless sidewalks where not a single piece of litter is found. For cyclists, these roads matter more than any speech or press release. Asphalt is proof. Asphalt is infrastructure. And yet, doubts persisted. Could Rwanda handle the sheer load of international convoys, technical teams, broadcasting vans, and support cars that swarm the UCI Championships like a traveling army? The answer was in the Tour du Rwanda. Each February, the nation already welcomes dozens of professional teams, hundreds of cyclists, and thousands of fans. For over a decade, this continental race has tested Rwanda's ability to close streets, secure routes, and organize logistics across a nation of hills. The roads had already spoken. Rwanda was not an apprentice in cycling. It was a nation rehearsing for the world stage. But questions remain. Could those same roads, once filled with locals waving flags and cheering their homegrown riders, withstand the glare of global cameras? Could Kigali's compact grid avoid traffic collapse when tens of thousands of fans descend at once? Could the story of smooth tarmac outweigh the narrative of Africa's unpreparedness? The critics watched. Rwanda simply kept building. Security was another weapon in the arsenal of doubt. Commentators who had never visited Rwanda spoke of instability, of Africa as a continent of risks, of memories that refused to fade from 1994. To them, Rwanda was fragile, vulnerable, unsafe. But those who walked its streets knew better. Kigali at night is calm, orderly, and safer than many Western capitals. Visitors often remark on the absence of harassment, the visible presence of community policing, and the culture of trust that underpins public life. Rwanda's homicide rate is one of the lowest in Africa. Petty crime is nearly non-existent. Tourists speak of leaving laptops in cafes, phones in taxis, and finding them exactly where they were left. This was not the security nightmare the skeptics imagined. It was, in fact, the opposite. And yet, the doubt was not entirely irrational. Global sport requires more than just safe streets. It demands crowd control, counter-terrorism strategies, and emergency preparedness. Hosting the UCI was not just about Rwanda proving itself safe. It was about Rwanda proving it could be as safe as France, Italy, or Australia. Could Kigali protect cyclists racing across open roads, accessible to anyone with a motorbike or camera? Could it reassure national teams worried about their athletes' security? These were not trivial questions. They cut to the heart of Rwanda's capacity to handle global pressure. The government responded quietly, not with boastful statements, but with systems. Specialized security units trained with international partners. Coordination was established between police, intelligence, and event organizers. Roads were mapped not only for efficiency, but for control. And perhaps most tellingly, Rwanda leaned into its culture of discipline, a country where public order is not an aspiration, but a daily reality. For decades, Rwanda had rebuilt itself on the promise of security. Hosting UCI was simply asking the world to believe what Rwandans already knew. But here lies the paradox. Could Rwanda's very orderliness be perceived as rigidity? Could the same tight security that reassures one visitor spark suspicion in another? In a global media space where narratives often overshadow nuance, Rwanda faced a double challenge: keeping the event safe and convincing the world that safety was not staged, but lived. When the world looked at Rwanda's bid, one of the loudest questions was not about roads or security, but money. How can such a small nation afford it? Hosting the UCI Road World Championships is not cheap. It requires tens of millions of dollars for logistics, international broadcasting, athlete accommodations, road maintenance, event promotion, and security coordination. For critics, Rwanda's economy seemed far too modest to carry the weight of a global sporting event. To them, the numbers didn't add up. But critics often forget that hosting such events is never about money alone. It is about priorities. Rwanda invested heavily in projects tied directly to tourism, hospitality, and global image. Hotels expanded capacity, adding thousands of new rooms in Kigali alone. Bugesera International Airport neared completion, promising to transform Rwanda's connectivity with the world. Roads and highways were upgraded not only for cyclists, but for the economy itself, linking rural farms to markets, tourists to destinations, and investors to opportunities. What skeptics saw as spending too much, Rwandans saw as investing in tomorrow. Still, the questions are worth asking. Would the revenues balance the costs? Would the influx of visitor cyclists, fans, journalists be enough to justify the billions of francs spent? Would this become a white elephant project, a burden on taxpayers rather than a legacy? The critics raised examples from elsewhere. Stadiums in Brazil left unused after the 2014 World Cup. Highways in Greece built for the Olympics but rarely driven today. Could Rwanda escape that fate? Or was it walking into the same trap? The answers were not simple. Rwanda's bet was not on short-term profit but on long-term prestige. The nation calculated that visibility millions watching Kigali on global television, headlines celebrating Africa's first UCI World Championships would bring returns far beyond ticket sales. This was not just about balance sheets. It was about shifting narratives, and in a world where image shapes investment, Rwanda gambled that the world's doubt could be converted into Rwanda's strength. If you want to know why Rwanda dared to dream of UCI, you only have to look at February on the Rwandan calendar. For years, the Tour du Rwanda has been the crown jewel of African cycling. It is no ordinary race, it is a pilgrimage of passion. Children chase cyclists up steep hills, waving flags, their voices echoing through valleys. Crowds pour out of villages to line the roads, transforming small towns into stadiums of their own. For a week, Rwanda becomes a cycling nation in its purest form. The Tour du Rwanda is more than sport. It is rehearsal, proof, and declaration. When the event was upgraded to UCI 2.1 classification, it became Africa's highest-ranked race, drawing professional teams from Europe, Asia, and the Americas. Riders who once doubted the continent's readiness were stunned by what they found: perfectly organized stages, safe roads, and a level of fan engagement that rivaled the Tour de France. For them, Rwanda wasn't Africa unready. Rwanda was a pioneer. But there is an irony in this success. The same race that proved Rwanda's capabilities also fueled criticism. Some said, yes, Rwanda can organize a continental race. But the World Championships, that's different. Others argued that Tour du Rwanda works precisely because it is African in scale, intimate, and deeply local. Could it scale up without losing its soul? Could Rwanda translate passion into performance when the stakes were global, when 1 billion viewers, not just local fans, were watching? This was the heart of the debate. Rwanda's cycling story was undeniable. Its roads were alive with bicycles, from commuters in Kigali to farmers in the countryside. The Tour du Rwanda had become one of the most unique, colorful races in the sport. Yet the question lingered: could passion be enough to silence doubt? Or would Rwanda's love of cycling collapse under the weight of global expectation? Whenever global events are awarded, one of the first boxes to tick is security. And for Rwanda, this was perhaps the most sensitive subject of all. The world's memory is long, and too many outside Rwanda still carry images frozen in 1994, the genocide, the chaos, the collapse. Critics whispered, can a country with such a past really guarantee the safety of thousands of athletes, officials, and fans? Would Rwanda's promise of stability hold up when tested by the sheer scale of the UCI Road World Championships? Those doubts had weight, but they also revealed a blindness to Rwanda's reality today. Kigali is one of Africa's safest capitals. Streets are well lit, crime rates are among the lowest on the continent, and international visitors consistently rank Rwanda as welcoming and orderly. Major conferences, the African Union Summit, the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, the World Economic Forum on Africa have all taken place in Kigali without a single incident. Rwanda's police force is professional, highly visible, and tech-enabled. In many ways, safety is one of the country's strongest calling cards. Yet, even with this reputation, critics asked harder questions. What about the region? What about Rwanda's proximity to troubled neighbors like the Democratic Republic of Congo? Could regional instability spill over? The government countered with facts. Rwanda has not only kept itself stable, but has actively contributed peacekeepers abroad, from the Central African Republic to Darfur. If Rwanda could stabilize others, why doubt its ability to safeguard its own streets? Still, the skepticism wasn't just about crime or conflict. It was also about perception. The world has a tendency to hold African nations to harsher standards, expecting perfection where other countries are allowed mistakes. When protests happen in Paris or violence erupts near stadiums in Latin America, events go on. But when it comes to Africa, the narrative shifts. Is the continent ready at all? Rwanda, by securing UCI, was not just promising safety, it was challenging the double standard, insisting that Africa be measured by the same yardstick as everyone else. Perhaps the most repeated criticism was simple. Rwanda doesn't have the infrastructure. Cycling, after all, is a sport that demands perfection from the ground up. Roads must be smooth, wide, and secure. Cities must offer world-class hotels, training facilities, airports, medical centers, and media hubs. Critics argued Rwanda had ambition, but not the basics. On paper, they had a case. Rwanda is not France, with its centuries-old cycling culture and sprawling highways. It is not Belgium, where cycling is practically a national religion. But what the skeptics missed is how quickly Rwanda has built and continues to build. Kigali is unrecognizable from 2 decades ago. Its skyline rises with glass towers, its streets are swept daily, its traffic lights powered by solar energy. The Kigali Convention Center stands as a symbol of modern Africa, a dome of light hosting presidents, CEOs, and global leaders. The upcoming Bugesera International Airport, a $2 billion project, is set to handle millions of passengers annually, rivaling hubs across the continent. Hotels such as Radisson Blu, Marriott, and Serena provide the standards international athletes expect. Rwanda's road network, once rugged and unreliable, is now a source of pride. The climbs and descents of Musanze, Nyamata, and Huye are not only breathtaking but immaculately paved, offering cyclists a course as challenging as it is beautiful. Yet here too, questions linger. Would Rwanda's size limit its ability to host massive crowds? Could Kigali's hotels accommodate the tens of thousands expected? Would rural roads, scenic but narrow, create bottlenecks? These questions did not vanish. They hung over the preparations like shadows. But for Rwanda, the criticisms were less deterrents than motivators. Every road upgrade was a message. Every hotel expansion, every airport milestone, every investment in ICT infrastructure was a statement to the world. We are ready, and we will prove it. Rwanda wasn't trying to outbuild Europe, it was trying to outdefy expectation. And sometimes, that's even more powerful. If infrastructure was the skeptics' favorite argument, passion was Rwanda's silent weapon. Critics might not have realized it, but Rwanda had been living and breathing cycling long before UCI chose it as a host. The Tour du Rwanda, once a small regional event, had grown into one of the most respected races on the UCI Africa Tour. Riders from Europe, Asia, and the Americas came not just to compete, but to experience something unique: the feverish energy of Rwandan fans. On race days, the hillsides of Musanze and Nyabihu transform into seas of humanity. Children run barefoot alongside riders. Families wave flags from the rooftops. Entire villages pour into the streets, cheering with a fervor that rivals the Alps of France or the cobbled climbs of Belgium. To see cycling in Rwanda is to see sport woven into community. It is not just competition, it is celebration, ritual, identity. And yet, critics still doubted. Wasn't Rwanda too small, too new to the sport's global elite? Could it truly host a championship that had always belonged to cycling's traditional powerhouses? The answer was in the people. While Europe debated numbers, Rwanda was proving emotion. While skeptics doubted infrastructure, Rwanda showcased culture. And as the Tour du Rwanda grew broadcast on international networks, attracting top-tier teams, the message became clearer. Africa did not just deserve a seat at the table of cycling. It had already built one. But the Tour du Rwanda was also more than passion. It was preparation. Each edition became a rehearsal for logistics, crowd control, international coordination, medical readiness, road management. Year after year, Rwanda was quietly building muscle memory. So when the UCI Road World Championships arrived, it wasn't a leap into the unknown. It was the next step in a journey Rwanda had been running for decades. Of all the arguments made against Rwanda, perhaps the harshest was this: it cannot afford it. Critics pointed to the billions still needed for healthcare, education, rural development. They asked if pouring money into a sporting event was a distraction from urgent needs. They warned of white elephants arenas and facilities that shine for a week, then rot for decades. They cited examples from Olympic Games, from World Cups, from failed megaprojects in wealthier nations. These criticisms were not without merit. Rwanda is not a rich country. Every dollar matters. Hosting UCI required investments in roads, hotels, security, broadcasting, and tourism promotion. The price tag ran into hundreds of millions. And in a nation where some families still struggle for electricity or clean water, the question was fair. Was this the right choice? But Rwanda answered with a broader vision. The World Championships were not just about sport, they were about branding, about rewriting the narrative of a nation. Just as South Africa used the 2010 FIFA World Cup to announce its modern identity, Rwanda saw UCI as a chance to showcase stability, progress, and ambition. Every road paved was not just for cyclists, it was for farmers, traders, commuters. Every hotel built was not just for tourists, it was for future investors. Every camera broadcasting Kigali's skyline was not just for sport, it was a global marketing campaign seen by millions. And here lay the gamble. Would the investment pay off? Would cycling tourists, sponsors, conferences, and businesses flow in after the event? Or would Rwanda be left with debts and empty facilities? No one could answer with certainty. But Rwanda, bold and unflinching, bet on itself. And history often remembers those who dared to gamble big. Among the loudest doubts was security. Critics painted images of instability, old scars from Rwanda's history resurfacing in headlines. Could a small African nation really protect thousands of athletes, officials, and fans? Could Kigali prevent the chaos seen at major events elsewhere, from Olympic riots to World Cup stampedes? The world expected fragility. Rwanda delivered discipline. Kigali's streets were not just clean, they were safe. Visitors walked freely at night. Police presence was professional but not overwhelming. Digital surveillance networks, community policing, and careful coordination with international agencies created an atmosphere of calm confidence. Instead of fear, fans felt welcome. Instead of anxiety, cyclists felt free to focus on the race. The security risk argument dissolved into thin air, a shadow that never came. To understand Rwanda's feat, you have to compare. Germany hosted UCI with budgets running into billions. Australia relied on decades of sporting tradition and deep-pocketed sponsors. Belgium, the heartland of cycling, needed no introduction. It already had the roads, the history, the fan base. Rwanda, it had to build belief from the ground up. But in doing so, it offered a different model, a leaner, more community-driven approach. Roads were prepared not only for the race, but for everyday citizens. Hotels expanded not only for tourists, but for long-term economic growth. Kigali International Airport was modernized not just for the event, but for decades of connectivity. Where giants flexed wealth, Rwanda flexed strategy. And this raises a question. Who truly hosts better, the country that spends the most, or the one that transforms the opportunity into something lasting? When the UCI flag finally flew in Kigali, it was more than a sporting event. It was history. For the first time, the World Championships of cycling, the sport so deeply tied to Europe, were on African soil. For African riders, it was validation. For African fans, it was pride. For the continent, it was proof that exclusion was no longer acceptable. The symbolism stretched far beyond the race. It was about equality in global sport, about giving voices to new audiences, about expanding the definition of who belongs on the world stage. Rwanda became not just a host, but a symbol of Africa's readiness, of cycling's growth, of a global future where opportunity is not confined to one hemisphere. When the riders finally lined up, the cameras captured more than a competition. They captured Rwanda itself, the gleaming streets of Kigali, the rolling green hills that give the country its name, the faces of fans lining every stretch of road, their cheers echoing through valleys. The race was hard, dramatic, unforgettable, but the true victory was Rwanda's. For a week, millions of viewers across the world saw not the Rwanda of old headlines, but a Rwanda alive with energy, order, and modernity. The skeptics had warned of disaster. Instead, they witnessed elegance. When the dust settled and the medals were awarded, a deeper story remained. Rwanda had done what the world thought it could not. It had hosted the UCI World Championships with pride, with efficiency, with vision. But the lessons reach beyond cycling. They are about trust, about giving smaller nations the chance to prove themselves, about questioning stereotypes of Africa as not ready, about remembering that global sport is not just about tradition, it is about inclusion. Rwanda's gamble paid off. Its pride became Africa's pride. And for every young cyclist on the continent, it became a beacon that dreams can climb the highest hills, that the world can be reshaped, that sometimes the smallest nations ride the furthest.